This deep thoughts, more deep thoughts. And I want to know, from the last 2 weeks, we covered a lot of intensive stuff. I think it's intensive. Anything you want to talk about going back a couple times? I can tell you this, the video on YouTube is getting a lot of responses, a lot of people tuning in and watching. And I'm very glad for you guys who are doing that. And okay, so at any point, you got a question, something you want to ask, please do. And I want to give you my background. You know, you have to say to yourself, well, who is this guy and how is he qualified to speak on the things he's going to speak on? And I'll tell you the answer. You know that life is always not what you expect it to be. I expected my life to go one way, and God said, you got to go this way. And this way that he chose for me was the way of teaching. And I was just barely 21 when I was cast into the role of a high school biology teacher. Now I was just, and the kids were 16, and I'm 21, okay? Other teachers were asking me if I had a hall pass. True story. Anyway, I got into the teaching and the study of biology from the very beginning. And I taught at a public school, kind of a urban, suburban type of place. And we did a lot of in-depth teaching. Later on, and I taught at the university. I taught at Duquesne University and University of Pittsburgh, Community College of Allegheny County. And I got a master's in science and molecular biology, and went on and on and on. So a lot of my background is into biology. Then when I came out here, I began to work in statistics. So I have these two arms, the arm of biology and the arm of statistics. Anyway, that's who I am. And anyway, let me share some thoughts. Okay, first question. What is life? Have you ever thought about that? We are alive, right? I think. And what is it that makes us alive? How is it that we live? Okay, what is a living thing, really? We know when something's not living, but what is it that makes it alive? How is it that we live? Well, we all know this young lady. That's Miss Piggy. She's beloved of many, but unfortunately she's involved with a scandalous interspecies relationship. We'll talk about that later. The question is Miss Piggy alive? Well, she looks alive, she acts alive, she talks alive, but is she really alive? She is, of course she's not alive. She's a puppet. But she has so much of the qualities of life that when in other churches, they come and they do a puppet show, and they have a star puppet, a Miss Piggy character. They never let the children see them put the puppet in the box for storage, because that is essentially that puppet being dead. They only allow the children to see the puppet in the live state. What is it that makes the puppet alive? Even the guy here who's saying, of course not, has some aspects of life. There's a hand up his behind, right? So what is it that makes alive? And the answer is, this is the seal from Duquesne University. Spiritus, S-K vivivficat. And it translates as, it's the spirit that makes alive, okay? Why are we alive? Because there's a hand into our body. You know, we are a glove, and the Holy Spirit is in that glove. And that gives us life. You take the glove out, you take the hand out, and the body is just an empty glove. We've all been in places where people have passed away, right? They're here today, and they're gone today. What changed? What changed? The spirit left. The spirit left. Anybody have any experience with being present at the moment of death and seeing that when the spirit leaves, the person is no longer alive? It's the spirit that makes alive, right?
I did.
Yeah,
I'm sure some have been with a loved one. what I noted when I was with my mother, which is unusual, and it's the only time that she was in her hospital bed, her hospice bed, and I was sitting next to her, had my hand on her arm like this. And when she passed, and of course she was cold because, you know, everything was shutting down. She was very cool. And when I had my hand on her arm like this, when she expired, and we're all waiting for that next breath to come, because you don't know, because sometimes there's a lapse before they inhale again, you know, just like, okay, she's still here. Well, when she finally expired, after a few seconds, her arm got very warm. It was like a flush went through her. And I thought, that's her spirit leaving. You know, that heat was generated by her, the departure of her spirit. And I've never forgotten that. My sister was standing with my mom on the other side. She wasn't touching her body. And I thought, she's the only one that I had that with. I was touching her at that moment, and I felt that. So I believe that what you're saying, that energy was moved through her body and went up to heaven. So yeah, I felt that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. Yes.
It's a secondhand story, but it's my very best friend, and I missed it by a few seconds. Her husband too was in a hospice bed, and she was with him, and her pastor was in the same room. Yeah. And when he left, she felt a breeze just blow through, and she could just almost literally see it.
Yes, very common.
And
yes.
It was just like, and she turned around and she asked her pastor, "Did you see that?" And he said, "No, this is your experience."
Yeah. So it is the spirit that makes alive. You know. So here we are. We're all having the spirit is still in us because we're still walking around, but that's what causes it. All right. So here's a side issue, though. Is she still dating Kermit? Okay. Now this actually has some practical implication. Well, obviously, pigs and frogs do not date, except in Muppet Land. But why can't that happen in our world? Why can't dogs and cats have whatever you wouldn't want to call them, you know, gats or cogs? Why is it we don't have interspecies mating, dating? We'll get to that in another week. But pigs and frogs are, in fact, totally different. And they cannot date, mate. Well, they can date, I suppose, but that's about it. All right. So, here is the very famous Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel depiction of the moment of creation, of giving life to Adam. Question is, how old was Adam when this occurred? In other words, was Adam a baby, or was Adam essentially fully grown? Well, art and kind of common sense says he was at least a young man. This then is the thing that we spoke about last week, though. Remember I talked about a thing called apparent age? That the creation gave a certain age that appeared to be, so that it could have been that the world with its canyons and its rivers has an apparent age that was there at creation, just as Adam has this apparent age. So I don't know. This is a question I throw out there. But, you know. Okay, now there's this picture of Michelangelo with Adam. There's two things wrong with it, but I'll just focus on one. Anatomically, there's a problem with the depiction of Adam. Anybody spot that?
Belly button.
Anybody? What's wrong with that picture?
He answered you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Belly button?
Belly button. Exactly right. This is what's wrong.
Yeah.
Huh? Now, why do you suppose he's painted with a belly button? Probably because it was easier to do that than answer all the questions of where the heck is Adam's belly button. What is a belly button? Essentially, it's a scar. It's left behind by the umbilicus. the umbilical cord. Everybody, well, that's not really true. Because it's a scar, it can be excised. In other words, if you're having abdominal surgery of some sort, the surgeon can cut your belly button out, put it aside, and later on when he's sewing you back up, put the belly button back in, sew it back in. It's nothing more than a scar. He didn't have to do that, but most people feel very naked without a belly button. I've known people who, because of surgery, lack a belly button. They don't need it. It doesn't do any good, but it's just part of what you have. Anyway, why shouldn't Adam have a belly button? Because he doesn't have a mother. He was not born, right? He was created. Special creation. Okay. The other thing I find a little bit wrong anatomically, but I'll give Michelangelo a break, was his bicep. Seems a little bit overlarge, but okay. All right. So, you see, I look at these things and I ask questions. Yeah? Why this? Why that? As a matter of fact, if you look at Da Vinci's David, the statue I'm talking about? There's two things wrong with that statue of David. Okay? I know you only know it from memory, maybe you had a chance to be in Florence to see it, but David is uncircumcised, and yet he's a descendant of Abraham. And his hand is too big, but that's, all right. So, consciousness. What does it mean to be conscious? Because things can be alive, right? But yet not have consciousness. You take your pet, for example. You might have a very, very intelligent pet. And you probably do, else you wouldn't be your pet. But is your pet, does he have self-awareness, self-consciousness? Is he self-conscious? He can be conscious to a degree. They obviously know stuff, but does he know about himself? Here's something interesting. If you were to take, and I don't know if it's 100% true, but if you were to take a mirror and put it where your pet could look, they don't recognize themselves. They might say, "Who is that cat?" See, they might get upset and say, "Get out of here, you cat."
Actually, there's some experiments with crows where they seem to recognize themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
They put a spot on the crow that he can't see, and then when he looks in the mirror, so they evidently can do that much.
Yes. I mean, it's not a universal, But, I don't know, did Lucy ever see herself? Or
They acted like aloof from it, I don't think they saw it
yeah.
themselves.
Lucy was our cat. Okay, self-consciousness. That is another marvelous thing, to be conscious, right? So now I'm going to ask them, we're talking about life. Where does it come from? Okay, where does life come from? On the biological level. We're on a planet filled with life. Where did it come from? Well, obviously I'm going to give you the answer. And let me do this. This is an amoeba. Now, it's a very short video. But this amoeba, you can see there's motion inside. Already at this stage, and you see other little things swimming around, even at this stage, it is already extremely complex. Okay? This is a one-celled organism bearing complexity of motion. You see they're called pseudopods, they're extending in there. That's his way of moving. Now, amoebas are studied in high school biology all the time. And this is hopefully one of the more benign of the species, because there is another type of amoeba, amoeba histolytica, which is responsible for dysentery. This little guy, if he was his pathological cousin, would be responsible for the deaths of millions of people from dysentery. All right, so that's him. So, even a very simple organism, such as the amoeba or the paramecium, and all these little critters, already at that one cell stage, already are complex. Okay? So these are marvels of creation in their simplicity. So, what do we need? If you're going to have life on a planet, what do you need? All right. And I put in parentheses, or anywhere else, because I don't know. The question often arises, is there life elsewhere? I don't know. And God says, none of your business. I suspect, I don't know. I suspect not. Really. I don't know. We saw in the first week billions of galaxies, billions of stars having countless numbers of planets. Surely in that vast multitude, there's another place. But I don't know, maybe not. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. Anyway, what is required? Well, these things. You're going to need water, oxygen, moderate temperatures, nutrients, and an atmosphere. Now, the Earth is unique in having water. It has a lot of water. 70% of the globe is water, right? Temperature is moderate. We don't either. We're not Venus, we're not Mars. Our temperature is correct. We have a correct atmosphere. Well, Venus, Pluto, all the others, they don't have the atmosphere. You go to Mars, you have nothing there. We are unique because we got what we need here. And again, could that be true elsewhere? I don't know. I suspect not. Why? Because God is extravagant in what he does. He says, I'm going to do all this for them. I'm going to do all of that because I want these people. I want the descendants of Adam. Maybe that's vain to think that we deserve that, but I think God loves us uniquely. Anyway. All right, so this is a view. And what they tell me, what I understand, is you go into space and you look at our planet. It's blue. You don't see blue planets. You see maybe a red planet because of all the rocks. We're blue because of the water. Unique. So as far as I know, only Earth meets those requirements. Okay. So, this is the big issue. Does life, what we're enjoying now and what we see in our pets and in all the critters and everything around us, does life come from non-life? Non-life. For a very, very, very long time, right up until the middle of the 1800s, the common belief was, yes, it does. In other words, if you leave something laying out, next thing you know, it's going to have yeast on it. It's going to have mold. Where did that mold come from? Well, it just came. It was just there. They had no idea that mold comes from the spores. So their belief was that life, the mold, comes from non-life, just being out there. Even so far as wondering, where do maggots come from? Because they didn't necessarily see the flies laying the eggs and things like that. Louis Pasteur put an end to that. I don't know if I have a picture of him. He put an end to that with a very famous experiment that could never be refuted. So we have the evolution model, though. See, the evolution model is opposed to the creation model. And if you haven't noticed, I'm on God's side saying, yay, creation. The creation model says something totally different. It says life from non-life. And I say, how does that happen? And the evolutionist says, you creationists are ignorant. Because if you were smart as we are, you'd understand that this is the way things work. And I said, no, I don't understand that at all. Evolution is the standard curriculum. As a matter of fact, this is the majority report. I'm telling you, your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, that's all they hear. All they hear is everywhere. And if you were to say, well, I'm going to teach my grandchildren about creation, they're going to say, well, that's child abuse. Creation is a minority report. Evolution is what is taught and believed. And heaven help you, if you want to be in a university, Grand Canyon is a Christian university, so I can get away with it. But, you know, help you if you were at a university and you want to say, nope, God did this. And they're going to say, no, evolution did this. So we're going to take a look at evolution. But I'm telling you, this is what everybody is learning. Every single class, every single school throughout the country, throughout perhaps the world. Any thoughts on that?
Why can't evolution come after creation?
Well,
why can't evolution be created?
Well, that's the problem is that's now going to be what they call theistic evolution. Theistic, meaning God-directed evolution. It could be that way, but it is not necessary. Well, at some point, you have to get back to the roots. Where does life come from? We have to have a starting point. Okay, so, you know, evolution is the worldview. It's what people believe. And I'll tell you what's wrong with it in a little bit. I'm going to go into details at the molecular level. But this is what people generally believe. And they'll make little comments, you know, such and such a thing evolved. Okay, cool. You read about it, you hear it, they throw the word evolve around a lot. Okay, so I told you my background. Evolution rests on what I call two pillars. The pillar of chance and the pillar of mutation. And both of my backgrounds in biology deals with the mutation part. The chance, when I did my statistics work, that informs me of the unlikelihood, okay? Two pillars. Chance. And if you were here last week, I gave you a statement which I told you was going to take 6 months to digest. Well, it took me 6 months. This is a difficult concept because we are so used to chance. And I'm going to say this. There is no such thing as chance. Okay? Now you're saying, how can that be? How can that?
Or there's no free will.
Well, yes, right. What they mean by chance, they're saying chance is the agency, and if you have free will, that's the agency. They're saying chance is what causes things. It happened by chance. Okay? Chance is not a thing. Chance is not an agent. Like I said, it took me a while to get this. And I said last week, you're going to come up to me in the fellowship hall and say, I got it. Because that's what it did. 6 months it took me meditating on this. How can it be? How can it be? And then suddenly I realized, well, yeah, chance is a descriptor. It describes what happened or what might happen based upon probability, but it is not a cause. It's not the engine. Okay? And you remember we talked about the referee who flips the coin. Well, the way the coin lands is caused by the number of rotations and the gravity and all the rest. So the cause was not chance. Chance describes. It says, well, it has a 50-50 chance, 50-50 probability, but it didn't cause it. Okay? If you're Italian, capisce? Okay? All right. Because this distinction is very subtle. Evolutionists say chance is the agent of change. It is the agent of development. More than saying, well, chance is the result, it says it causes it to happen. Okay. All right. Stop me anytime. Okay, now, deeper water. Listen to this. Chance and God are diametrically opposed. If chance is, then we don't need God. Chance takes care of everything. Take your chances. But if God is, then he's the cause. And chance is just a description. So we have these two forces, the force of God and the force of chance. Huh? So again, very radical statement. And again, if chance is, God is not. But if God is, then chance is not. Huh. Bud. Stop it, Bud.
Well, right in what you just said, I'm seeing free will. Does free will come into what?
Of course it does.
God versus.
Well, God creates us with free will, but what we do by free will is not done by chance. Okay? So if I rob a bank, it's not by chance that I rob the bank, it's by free will. Okay? So God has created us with the ability, okay, to act, to be an agent of change. But chance is blind. Chance is a nothing. Okay? So I highlight this. Nothing happens, this is the key word, by chance. Nothing happens by it. All right? And you're very right about the free will. The free will is not chance. The free will is an agent. All right. More stuff. All right. Yeah. I call this an agency. And an agency is a thing which works, a thing that does. Okay, so chance is not an agency. Keep going back over that. And the reason why this is important here is because this is diametrically opposed to evolution. Because evolution says it happened by chance. Chance alone caused it. It didn't happen by God, of course, but it happened by chance. All right, let's continue. So this is a kind of complex one. And the key thing is what's in yellow. Okay, what I really want to hammer home. Chance doesn't cause. It doesn't cause. It just describes. Okay. Yep. All right. But this, again, is why this concept is so important. Because secular humanism that has God out of the picture, or the entire evolution model, builds its case on chance. And by the way, last week I mentioned deism, D-E-I-S-M. Deism is not Judeo-Christian theology. Deism is different. Deism says, yeah, there is a God somewhere out there, but he has nothing to do with us. And we pray to an empty sky. Because in deism, there's no two-way street. As a matter of fact, it's really part of that watchmaker theory where God puts it together, throws it out there, and then we're on our own. Okay, so, all right, so let's look at this. In terms of secular humanism, at the bottom, space, which is nothing, right? We looked at space, there's nothing there, plus time, nothing, plus chance is everything. So the evolutionist says, give me enough space, give me enough time, and give me enough chances, well, we'll have it. We'll have it. We don't. Is there any questions about that? This is what they believe. Space, nothing, it works like this. Nothing plus nothing plus nothing equals everything. And they say we're anti-intellectual. Okay, I referred to Louis Pasteur. I'm trying to develop his look, trying to copy his beard and his mustache. All right, so 1858. Louis Pasteur, he gave us pasteurization. And a bunch of other things. But he defeated the doctrine of abiogenesis. Abiogenesis means life from non-life, okay? And so he said back then, well, you know, space and time and chance is nothing. And now they say, okay, you didn't give it enough time. Give it enough time. Space plus time plus chance will be, in other words, the reason why it's not working is because it needs an infinity of time for something to happen. I don't know. But that's what they believe. This is known as spontaneous generation. Spontaneous generation. And, well, it doesn't happen. All right. We have certain biological requirements for life, and they are, okay, amino acids. This takes us way back. Amino acids. Amino acids assemble themselves into proteins. Proteins are incredibly important. And these things are coded by nucleic acid, DNA, RNA, all and their friends. And it's kept within a cellular membrane. That amoeba we saw, that amoeba had that cellular membrane, contained everything. Otherwise, just go everywhere. So we have amino acids, proteins, and they're coded by nucleic acids. Fantastic stuff, okay? This is what's required for a biological living system. Okay, this is a meme, M-E-M-E. This is an evolutionary meme. And, okay, so starting in the upper left, we got, I don't know, a strand of DNA. And it develops into cyanobacteria, which then develops into a flagellated protozoan. And then it goes on to become various kinds of fish, and then amphibians and reptiles and mammals and monkeys and man. So in other words, we trace our ancestry back to that strand of DNA in what's known as the primordial soup. This model, this non-life to life model, has been abandoned because this doesn't work, okay? This is old theory. And as a matter of fact, Darwin was mid-19th century. He was before Gregor Mendel in genetics. He was way before everything we know about DNA and things like that, way before. Okay, but this is what I was exposed to as a kid. This is what they were telling me I was supposed to teach the kids in my classroom, okay? And I said, that makes no sense at all. And I couldn't do it. Fortunately, nobody checked up on me. But there were other teachers in that school who fully believed that we went from the littlest non-complex form to here we are. Man. All right. This is called the primordial soup. I like this concept. Primordial soup. And what's in the primordial soup? This was the sea, the ancient sea, and in this ancient sea were a number of things. Sugars, lipids, proteins, DNA, RNA. And they assembled themselves, guess what the words are? By chance, into a cell. Well, there's a lot wrong with this because each of these components is in itself already complex. Okay? How do you make a protein? How do you have a lipid that's fatty? It's like a bubble, you know. How do you have a lipid membrane that it doesn't dissolve on itself. Okay? That's like saying you got bubbles and you got sugar molecules and you got some protein and you're going to put it all together and bingo, there's a cell. Well, here's the thing. 1952. Famous experiment. This is the Stanley Miller Urey experiment. And Miller was a student, Urey was the faculty member, and together they worked on it. So they have this apparatus here. And that apparatus has a number of things in it that mimic or mirror the prehistoric world. Water, methane, ammonia, and I'm not sure what the other thing is, whatever, what they needed. And they heated it and they condensed and all the rest. And here's the important thing. A spark was put into it. All right? A spark. And the theory was, okay, we have what was in the primordial soup world. Let's see if we can't duplicate it. Let's see what we can make. Well, the very best they could make was amino acid. And nothing else. Nothing else. That was 72 years ago. What has happened since then? Cannot be done. Nothing. They've never been able to replicate the primordial soup world of even a simple amino acid. And and if you don't have the amino acid, you don't even have a starting point. That's the thing. You don't even have any place to start. All right? So here's the thing. When evolutionists when the world system begins to recognize that spontaneous generation, what they were doing with the test tubes and all that, that was a type of spontaneous generation. When they recognize that that can't be done, when they say the spontaneous generation is not possible, what then do we believe? Well, here's the choices. We can believe in God, or we can believe in something else. We cannot believe in God, because that's who we are. Therefore, we have to believe in something else. Where did the life come from? It did not come from the primordial soup. Where did it come from? What do you think they say? What is the answer they now give? Anybody know? What answer is given now?
Meteors.
Well, I'll tell you. Many people believe, okay, many people believe, okay, cannot do it on the earth. It's not working, Dr. Miller has proven it to us, and no one's ever been able to do it anyway in 72 years. Now, it can't come from here, and it can't come from God because we cannot accept that. It had to come from outer space. Or as they are known, as ancient aliens. So the idea is we as a planet were visited once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away by people, or maybe not even people. Let's say we were seeded with life. We were seeded by maybe some bacterial forms.
We weren't existent then, though.
Well, yeah, isn't that the problem? So what they're saying is we have to move this goalpost. It can't be here. It must be there. And that avoids the whole problem because we don't know what there is. Aside from the fact, there's a lot of problems with figuring that life outside of us came and bestowed life on us. It even goes so far as saying, you know what, you guys were too stupid as a species to know how to build a pyramid. And it had to be help from outer space that did that. I always remember a very famous cartoon, and it shows two workers on the Sphinx. And lying at the foot of the Sphinx is the Sphinx's nose. And the other worker says, "Nice nose," I said, "but you had to give it one more whap." Knocked it off. Well, let me show you this. This is worth seeing.
Daily Clearly presents, what is DNA and how does it work? DNA, also known as deoxyribonucleic acid, is a molecule. It's a bunch of atoms stuck together. In the case of DNA, these atoms combine to form the shape of a long, spiraling ladder, sort of like this one here. If you ever studied biology or saw the movie Jurassic Park, you probably heard that DNA acts as a blueprint or a recipe for a living thing. But how? How on earth can a mere molecule act as a blueprint for something as complex and wonderful as a tree, a dog, or a dinosaur? To help answer that question, let's first take a quick look at amino acids. Amino acids are tiny little chemicals inside our bodies that are so important, they're often referred to as the building blocks of life. There's about 20 different kinds, each with their own unique shape. The neat thing about them is they can be attached to each other kind of like Legos to produce an endless variety of larger particles known as proteins. Amino acids make up proteins. Proteins, along with other chemicals, combine to form living cells. Cells make up tissues. Tissues make up organs. And organs, when they're all put together and functioning, of course, combine to form living creatures like you and me. These proteins that make up our bodies, and keep in mind there's millions of different kinds of proteins, they each have to be formed in the perfect shape in order to function. If they're the wrong shape, they usually won't work. That's where DNA comes in. DNA does a lot of interesting things, some of which we don't fully understand, but one of its main and most well understood functions is to tell amino acids how to line up and form themselves into the perfect protein shapes. In theory, if the right proteins are built at the right time and in the right place, everything else from cells to organs to entire creatures will come out just fine. This here is a simplified model of DNA. It shows us that the steps of the ladder are made up of 4 different kinds of chemicals shown here by different colors and letters. If you look at just one half of the molecule, you can read its chemical sequence or genetic code from top to bottom, sort of like a book. A single strand of DNA is extremely long, millions of letters long. It spends most of its life coiled up like a noodle, living inside the nucleus or the centerpiece of a cell. Amino acids, however, live outside the nucleus in what's called the cytoplasm. To help DNA interact with the cytoplasm and convert those amino acids into proteins, special chemicals inside the nucleus make partial copies of the DNA code. These partial copies, called RNA, look a lot like DNA, but they're shorter, of course, and they're missing one of their sides. Their small shape and size allows them to fit through tiny pores in the nucleus, out to the cytoplasm, and into the mouth of another particle called a ribosome. Ribosomes are protein-building machines. They read the RNA code 3 letters at a time, suck amino acids out of their surroundings, and stick them together in a chain according to the RNA code. As the chain grows, it bends, it folds, and it sticks to itself to form a perfectly shaped protein. Every 3 letters of the RNA code tell the ribosome which of the 20 different kinds of amino acids should be added next. For example, CAA tells the ribosome to grab a glutamine. AGU tells it to grab a serine, and so on. Once a protein is built, it can then go on to do a number of different things, one of which could be to help form a brand new cell. So to answer the original question, what is DNA? DNA is a molecular blueprint for a living thing. How does it work? DNA creates RNA, RNA creates protein, proteins go on to form life. This entire process, as complicated, as sophisticated, as magical as it might seem, is entirely based in chemistry. It can be studied, it can be understood.
Okay, so that's deep, but it's not as deep as it obviously can be. That's what I did for my master's. So, the basic code joins with amino acids Amino acids form proteins, but the proteins fold and stick to each other. And depending upon how they are arranged, that will determine how it functions. Okay? We'll see that in a little bit. But if you really wanted to have a visual image of DNA in a cell, a good visual image is you get some, what do you call them, a skein of yarn, okay? And if you had that, all the yarn in every which way, a Scottish folded ear cat, okay? He has folded ears by a mutation. The mutation hurts the survivability of this cat. If this cat is a pet, he's going to do fine, I guess. But in the wild, that mutation is deleterious. Why? Because he loses some ability to hear. And he needs to hear things to survive. He needs to hear the mice. He needs to hear what's coming for him. This is a disadvantage. Okay? We had a couple of cats. We had one that was a Himalayan. Short, stubby legs. Couldn't hardly climb up on a sofa. I don't think it did. That was another deleterious mutation. Himalayans. Long, curly hair. It's a disadvantage. So mutations are destructive, not constructive. If they're in the body, okay, within us right now, okay, they're going to do stuff. They're going to make what I call gnarlies. You got a growth. Or, worse, you got a cancer. What's a cancer? A mutation that is in our body. And it's not doing us any good. Okay? If the mutation, however, is not in our general body, but it occurs earlier in life and affects the sperm or the ovum, we pass it on. Then it becomes deleterious, not just to us, but the offspring and offspring after them. Okay? So we could pass on genetic defects, such as hemophilia, such as polydactylism, having 6 fingers, and it'd be kind of difficult to get gloves, but you know, the polydactylism, it's very prominent among the Amish in Pennsylvania because they intermarry, see? All right, cystic fibrosis is another one, okay? What's interesting about some of these, they are what's known, see, and Gregor Mendel could have helped out here, a lot of these are recessive. Recessive. In other words, it takes that person to have the problem and another person as well. Huntington's chorea. Ever heard of that? That is a neurological disease where people have jerky movements and ultimately they die early. Huntington's chorea is recessive. And if by chance 2 people who unknown to them have this in their genetic history, if they come together, then the child will have it. Same thing, cystic fibrosis. It was in the Landry family. We come from France through French Canada. We settled in Nova Scotia, where the French Canadians hung out with each other. So what was going on is the French families were marrying each other over time. You know, so you would be a Landry, you marry a Fougere, and Fougere would marry a Travaux, and you know, but they still stayed local. What did they do? That increased your likelihood of 2 recessive genes coming together, and your kids got cystic fibrosis. All right. But in nature, mutations do not make individuals or the species better. They are always bad. This is a map. Chromosomes don't look like that. This is how they're mapped. Okay. Look at trisomy 21, the 21st chromosome. There's 23 pairs. The 23rd pair, by the way, are the sex chromosomes, either male or female. 2 X's for female, XY male. But trisomy 21, what does that cause? We see a lot of it. Trisomy 21. Anyone?
Sickle cell?
That's Down syndrome.
Oh, Down syndrome.
That's Downs. Okay? And let me go back. What's interesting about that? You say, okay, you added an extra. How could that be bad? I can see if you took one away, but how is adding to it bad? And the thing with chromosomes, you cannot add, subtract, multiply, or divide. They are what they are. If you add a chromosome, you now produce downs. Also, what I want to point out, look at the Y chromosome. He's a fairly little guy, okay? Fairly little. But what he does, well, he makes boys, and girls. Well, okay. So, this is chromosome 7 of the 23, okay? And this is the cystic fibrosis damaged chromosome, recessive gene, but it requires a match from each parent. But remember, I said that the Landrys were French Canadians, so they often found a match unbeknownst to them, because the person they married in that person's history, which isn't that far back, also had the gene. My aunt and uncle, okay, 2 people that had 3 children. 2 of their children had cystic fibrosis, and they were dead by 13. They might live a little longer now, but it's a terrible disease. Okay? You recognize that as a Simpson character. A lot of people think of mutations this way. You said Spider-Man, for example. Okay? Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider, and he changed. Well, it doesn't work that way. You get bitten by a radioactive spider, you got a radioactive spider bite, but you don't change radically. In other words, it doesn't empower him to be a different species. A 3-eyed fish. Well, here's the problem. An eye has multiple components, right? If you were to evolve a retina by itself, it doesn't work. You got to have all these component parts at the same time. Otherwise, the thing's non-functional. See what I mean? It all has to be together, or else it doesn't work. It's not a matter of simply saying, well, this is a mutation, therefore ipso facto it's going to be great. No. Mutations, then. Where do they come from? What causes them? They're caused by things that damage the DNA. Remember, it's going to be, now instead of the cat ate the rat, it becomes the cat ate the mat, which makes no sense. You damage your DNA in time. How do we do that? We damage our DNA through things like smoking. Okay? And how does that work? Well, the smoke particles are poisonous, carcinogenic, and you know, when the smoke comes in, the smoke's got to go out. If it goes out through your lungs, well, you're looking at obviously lung cancer, mouth cancer, all the rest. It can also be excreted through the urinary system. And you can have bladder cancer and all that, and kidney cancer. And then might be excreted through the entire digestive system. Now you got stomach cancer, intestinal cancer, colon cancer. You cannot mess with DNA. Don't mess with it. What else you do? Viruses, radiation, toxins in the environment. Yeah? Toxins in the environment damages DNA. Fortunately for us, we have protection that when a cell goes bad internally, most of the time, the body recognizes that as a bad cell and will destroy it through the agency of a thing that's known as killer T cells. They'll spot the difference and they'll go for it. But the problem is they don't always spot the difference. So if you have a growth somewhere, that is a type of mutation. It's harmless, I suppose. But anyway. So here's the final thought. We compare ourselves as creationists with evolutionists. They say it's by chance, it's by random acts, nothing has meaning. And we're saying, no, no, no. We're not created by mutations. We're not created by chance. We're created by God, for God. And therein lies the entire difference. Well, hopefully we can pass this thought. Might not be able to convince anybody, but the thing is, evolutionists and secular humanists, they don't own the entire argument. There's more to be said. All right, and that's what I guess I see, two worldviews. The worldview of secular humanism, evolution, versus the worldview of Judeo-Christian values. All right, so I will say, along with my friend Porky, that's all, folks. So, anything you'd like to ask, talk about. You remember, we have places to go, lunches to eat, things like that, so don't forget that. Anything you'd like to ask?
I didn't follow your argument that all mutations are bad.
Well, they are, because in some way, they will put the organism that has it at a handicap. For example, the eye. Let's say you have the development of a third eye. How does that happen? Okay, let's qualify that. I would say majority of the mutations are bad, vast majority.
But doesn't natural selection weed those out? That's the...
Well, see, okay, the thing is, and this comes from another week, we have natural selection, which is survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest is not the same as the arrival of the fittest.
No.
Okay? But would it weed them out? Yes, it would. And that's the thing. I believe they would weed out very quickly. I cannot personally think of a mutation example that would be beneficial. It might be, but okay, there's more. Let's say two individuals are mating. One individual has a mutation, the other one doesn't. How does that get passed on? You see, the mutation has to be present in both to be viable. Anyway, I see a lot wrong with the mutation model. And anyway.
But yet that's what most scientists believe.
Oh yeah,
Biologists believe.
most biologists will believe one of two things. Life occurred here by spontaneous generation through the primordial soup that we talked about, or life began here through outer space seeding life on our planet. That's it. That's the belief system.
I don't know any scientists who believe that life was seeded.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
a kind of a...
Okay, suppose here's our planet, and here comes the spaceship.
Yeah, no, I understand the concept. And panspermia is based on that, but it isn't something that's widely considered to be a good...
It's getting to be more and more widely believed.
I don't think so. I think most people understand that, and it doesn't do anything for you, because if they came from somewhere else, then how...
It simply pushes it back to someplace else.
It doesn't solve that problem.
It doesn't solve the problem, it just pushes away.
And it wasn't intended to. It's more a matter of trying to understand what goes on between planets, if it's possible life gets passed from one to another. But it doesn't help with the origin.
Doesn't help at all. You go back to the primordial soup is where it starts. Can we create life in that primordial soup? So far, no.
Yeah, well, but there's a lot of things science hasn't solved, and if they solve them, then will you change your view of this if somebody really figures out how life started? And of course, that may not be possible. It's been 3 billion years, and there just may not be evidence you can use anymore to really understand it.
Okay, suppose we did that. Suppose we put together all the components. Do we have that Frankenstein moment where we zap it and now it's alive? I mean, suppose we did make a cell artificially. Does that cell still possess life? I don't know. It could simply be a cellular organism, but doesn't have that spark of life. It would be a non-living cell.
I don't think any scientist would say that we understand the origin of life. It's a seriously difficult problem.
It really is difficult. Yes, it is. Very difficult.
It may not have been solved yet simply because it is so difficult and there's so much to it.
Yeah, but they've been working on it for 72 years.
Oh, yeah, but
That doesn't mean on the 73rd year they won't have it solved, but
And like I said, some biologists have told me they're never going to solve it because what happened 3 billion years ago, there's just the evidence just isn't with us.
That's right.
So
Okay.
it may be that it's an impossible scientific problem, which scientists don't like to always admit to.
So, Bud, we use the word mutation in a negative. That's just how we're using it for this. And that's okay. I'm not finding any fault in that. If we have the ability now to look at DNA that we didn't 1,000 years ago. So now, if we were to look into the future, there is the possibility as of us finding a, quote, mutation that is not a bad connotation.
Well, we manipulate DNA all the time now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But because it's, to me, it's not logical that things don't change. Okay. I mean, and that isn't, to me, if somebody wants to say God keeps it all the same or God lets us change, that's not right for me. But with our knowledge of DNA, because we do use the word mutation to say that something is not survivable, something is not good. But we may not have the ability to see a change that's actually good for survival.
I can't imagine what that would look like. Anyway, thank you.
But there is that possibility.
Everything is possible. For example, if you take insulin, and I would assume nobody here does, decades ago, you know where you got your insulin from? The pancreas of a slaughtered pig. And then they realized, well, you know what? We can take some of the DNA from, let's say, that pig that makes the insulin and insert it into a bacteria. And then have this big tank of, it's actually E. coli, big tank of E. coli running its own internal machinery, and it's producing insulin. And that's how it's produced chemically. That's how it's now. And it's a good thing because we don't have enough pigs to provide natural pancreatic insulin. That's the best they had back then. Plus, you always had the reaction to the pigs and stuff like that. Anyway, well, listen, thank you, folks. Next week, we delve even further into mankind. All right. All right.
Okay, Bud, thank you, sir.
All right.